Well, good morning and welcome to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. You know, there's an old wives' tale that goes something like, if it rains on Easter, it'll rain the next 7 Sundays. Time will only tell what happens when it snowed on Easter, but I think we have an idea what's happening. My name is Ruth Robarge. I'm your moderator this morning. Happy to be here. Do we have any visitors who would like to either stand and introduce themselves, or if you brought somebody, could you stand and introduce your guests? Yes. Hi.
From the Mainline Unitarian Church in Gibbon, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Welcome.
And our son might be watching it, Reverend whoever, and he's sharing influence. I'm going to try to connect you to live stream.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes, it's all live stream. Anyone else? Well, that's good. As you could tell, the heat is still off. We're getting our heating changed out, so it'll be on and running perfectly by the time the weather warms up. So don't worry. We also want to welcome the people joining us online, because we do have a presence. So don't forget that they're here. Hi, y'all. Welcome. Today, after the service, we have what is called a Sunday Plus lunch, and I believe that's going to be for the good of our coming of age group. So come and support them, and then there's a chat afterwards, I think. So lots to do today. If you are a visitor, whether you introduced yourself or not, you're still very welcomed and are welcome to come down to the dinner and just let them know that you're a visitor, and they'll let you come and eat for free. So that's just down the hall to what we call Conover. So that's all I have to say this morning. I usually write things down. I didn't write anything down this morning. Welcome again, and thank you for being here on this splendid morning.
Good morning. Welcome to everyone. Welcome especially to the members of the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly Planning Committee who gathered in Kansas City this weekend for a site visit. Some of them are joining us this morning, and we are glad that you are here with us. If you have time before your flight this afternoon, please do join us as our guests for lunch. And I remind everyone of the church chat beginning at 12:45 to discuss our vision for pastoral care here at All Souls. Peace, says the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay, is the temporary, beautiful ignorance that war somewhere progresses. This week, the drumbeat of war is once again loud in our ears. On the other side of the globe, ordinary people watch their lives disintegrate and suffer and die for the sake of the old mad ambition to run the world, a virus that still makes reckless the hearts and minds of those with a will to power. We know what is demanded of us if we would serve the good, have known from the days of the ancient prophets. Only this: to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly. And yet corruption and cruelty and arrogance have their way with the world, and none of us is immune. Muddy April freezes and thaws, offering blossoms one day and snow the next. Will spring ever truly arrive? Even the beauty and tranquility of this house of aspiration is obscured by construction debris, piles of the new awaiting installation, heaps of the old awaiting disposal, the chill of heating systems in the process of upgrade. We are surrounded by the suspense of the temporary and the transient, an old order already left behind, a new vision not yet realized. In such a moment of moral risk and suspense 80 years ago, the poet T.S. Eliot wrote these words of confession and prayer. All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie, the romantic lie in the brain of the sensual man in the street, and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. Defenseless under the night, our world in stupor lies. Yet, dotted everywhere, ironic points of light flash out, wherever the just exchange their messages. May I, composed like them of eros and of dust, beleaguered by the same negation and despair, show an affirming flame. May this covenant community of memory and promise be a place where the just exchange their messages. May we, composed like all our mortal kin of eros and of dust, beleaguered as we are by many forms of negation and despair, nevertheless show an affirming flame, such as the chalice we kindle now in token of our heritage and our shared hope.
Good morning. My
morning.
name is Khalil, and I light this chalice for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Thank you, Khalil. Now I invite you to rise as you are willing and able and speak again the words of our community's covenant. Together we affirm goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And let's remain standing for our opening hymn. Our commitment to human fellowship means that we are called upon to be glad with those who rejoice and to weep with those who mourn. And therefore we set aside this time in our gathering to share with one another the joys and the concerns that are now shaping our lives. May the beauty and sweetness of these brief flowers remind us to hold one another in the bonds of sympathy, encouragement, and care. We will have a time at the end of our sharing for anyone who prefers not to appear on camera as part of our live stream broadcast to come forward. So just wait until the end if that's the case for you. I'm going to begin by placing a flower in honor of my father, Theodore James Rowan, whose ashes were laid to rest on Thursday at Arlington National Cemetery in a ceremony that he would have appreciated very much by family who loved him very much. Are there other joys or concerns to be shared this morning? Please. Come on up and use the mic so everyone can hear if you would.
Hi, Darnell. Hello.
Hey.
I'd like to share the joy of returning home to my church home after many years of break. So I haven't been to a religious service in quite some time. It feels good to be home, so I'm excited to be home.
It's great to see you. Want to put a flower?
Yes, let's do it.
Thank you so much. Welcome back.
I'm Rod Harson. Thought I'd let you know I have prostate cancer. I'm started hormone suppression treatment, and I'll start radiation treatments in June. But the doctors say if I do this, I have an excellent prognosis.
That's so great to know. Thanks, Rod.
Good morning.
Morning.
As those of you who've gotten to know me know, my wife is from literally the other side of the world, like me. And her brother, my brother-in-law, has had a recurrence of his thyroid cancer. He had it a few years ago. And that was bad enough, of course, but he also is from a remote part of Northeast India and could not get treatment anywhere in Northeast India, so he had to go from a decent-sized town to the massive city of New Delhi for treatment. And he has been away from home since February 28th, away from his family. But he finally did have surgery a couple days ago. Is that right, dear? And the surgery went very well. So it's a sorrow turning into a joy. Hopefully he'll be back home with his family soon.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I hope he does well.
My name's Scott England, and two joys. One, getting to meet with the GA Planning Committee yesterday as part of the local area task force, so I'm really excited about GA coming up and everything happening. The other one, a little more personal, today is my mother-in-law's 79th birthday.
Wow.
And she just got out of the hospital on Friday, is doing well, so we'll all be gathering at her house for cake, ice cream, and all sorts of other things that she probably shouldn't have on a diabetic diet, but you know, when you get to 79, a day here and there,
right,
we'll let it pass.
Right. Eat what you want on your birthday.
Okay. Hello, my name's Heather. So as you can tell, one more month.
Yes. All right, yay.
I know. And then also, last week we thought that she had a heart problem, but it's passed and disappeared. So we're very grateful.
Yay.
So thank you.
Everybody keep a lookout for when we schedule our quilt shower for Heather and her baby.
Well, I have a joy. Hopefully it's a joy. Tax season is just about done. So all of us, all those last-minute contributions and people who work in the finance industry and all the people who do tax preparations all get to take one big last breath and then do Monday. I hope it's not a concern for anyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruth. Cassie?
My joy is because I get to run in the color race with my mom, and she brings love to me, and I'm glad about that. So this flower is to my mom.
All right. Well done. Thank you.
Sorry, guys. I would be upset at myself if I didn't come back one more time. But our son, many of you guys remember my son, Dariante Roby. Just a few days ago, he was awarded a $42,000 scholarship from Graceland University out of Lamani, Iowa, to continue. It was his lifelong dream to play basketball, so he's going to be playing college basketball and classical piano as well. So he was going to school with that. So thanks to everybody who invested time in Dariante, helped to build him up. This is, our son is, got that scholarship. So thank you guys, appreciate it.
What a great combination. I love it. Basketball and classical music. Okay.
Hello, my name is Cyan, and I would like to share the joy of having a new baby sister in a month.
Wow. All right. That's good.
Hi, I'm Marley Murphy, and I would like to share the joy of a full church. I am ushering today. We're out of programs, folks.
All right.
We've been out of programs.
That's one of those good problems, and we can always make more.
Hello, my name is Rose, and I finally weigh 80 pounds so I can ride without a car seat.
Well done, you. I think that is cause for celebration. Yes.
Okay, this is Nevi and Ryan, and they just got shy. They wanted to They wanted to celebrate friendship.
Oh,
and
nice.
So that's their joy.
Okay. Does one of you want to do a flower? All right. Okay. All right. Good job. Thank you. All righty.
I would like to share the joy of loving my family.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Butcher, and some of you may know that I have a transgender child, and so I'm celebrating that joy and the joy of really good health insurance, because as we go into this transition, his first shot of hormone blockers, the bill came and it was $10,000 for one injection.
Yeah.
And we have amazing health insurance, and I know that there are a lot of people who don't.
Yeah.
And I don't know how on earth we would do it without a good, company that backs us.
Right.
So we celebrate that joy.
That's good news, and good luck to him. Oh, there you are. I'm sorry, I'm looking for you. Sure. Okay. All right. So we are ready to lose the camera. And become holy ourselves. Let us be aware of the source of being, common to us and to all living things. Evoking the presence of the great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves, and towards all living beings. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other. With humility, with awareness of the existence of life and of the sufferings that are going on around us, let us practice the establishment of peace in our hearts and on earth. Amen. We thank the children for being with us, and you may now depart to your classes, and we will sing.
Morning. I'm Anthony Edwards, and I'm your music director here at All Souls. And it's one of the other privileges I have, as well as being your music director, is being on the AIDS Service Foundation board of Greater Kansas City. The AIDS Service Foundation is an organization that helps provide money and funding for the 4 AIDS service organizations and the community grants that we are able to give to smaller organizations who help folks that live in Greater Kansas City area with HIV and AIDS. We here at All Souls every Sunday say our mission, and the first part of that mission is to build and inspire a greater community for the bigger Kansas City area. And one of the ways we do that is by giving part of our offering to a different not-for-profit every month. And this month is the AIDS Service Foundation. And I would like to introduce to you Michael Linthicum, who is the director of AIDS Walk Kansas City, and his partner, John Pinkerton, who is a former past president of the AIDS Service Foundation. Let's welcome them.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning. Thank you all for having us be a part of your service this morning. I understand that 2 other people have been here earlier in the month to share their stories about why AIDS Walk is so important to them. As Anthony said, the AIDS Service Foundation is the presenter of AIDS Walk Kansas City, coming up here on a sunny and warm Saturday morning. Okay, so the exciting thing, and I have for part of the theme today, the joy is for 30 years Kansas Cityans have been giving their time and energy, volunteer service, and hope to AIDS Walk Kansas City. The hope that we will someday we will know a world without AIDS. My concern is we're not there yet, and that's why we do what we do. I get very emotional sometimes, so I'll just take a big, deep breath, right? And so we have opportunities all the time to support those that are living with HIV and AIDS here in Kansas City. There are approximately 5,700 people. Out of that number, 700 are between the ages of 13 and 24. So that is why we keep walking. My friend Betty has walked with us for years and carries a flag in memory of somebody that we have lost. And she too has urged me, and I see Betty a lot, so I know it would come back to me this week if I didn't shout her out in one thing and thank her for everything she's done for years and years in the AIDS fight. And now, John.
Thank you, everyone. Again, I'm John, previous board president of the AIDS Service Foundation, but HIV really affects so many more people than just the numbers that Michael gave, and in many ways it impacts and affects us. And one of the challenges we have is that we're on our 30th year, and the needs 30 years ago are very different than the needs today. But we still have men and women and children and young adults who are living with a lifelong disease, one that doesn't have a cure, but does have sustained care. Unfortunately, everyone seems to think that there's a cure when there isn't one, or that everyone's just taken care of. Just take another medicine and you'll be fine for the rest of your life. But in reality, this disease has issues that bring about the need for better housing and the need for medical care, ongoing care, which is obvious, but more importantly, support care. And the money that you provide to the AIDS Service Foundation will actually stay in Kansas City and support everyone that has this disease in many, many, many ways. As a brother of someone who has HIV, I can tell you that just having HIV itself is one challenge. But when you deal with someone who has issues with drug abuse and you have issues with housing, things like having stable homes to live in so that you can then get the medicine so that you can stay on a regimen that keeps you alive is always a challenge. So this disease is really affecting so many more people than just those that have it. It affects their family, it affects their friends. And because, like you, we are a caring community, it affects Kansas City. So thank you so very much for your thoughtful and generous donation today. And thank you for continuing your fight for those living with HIV and AIDS.
Thank you. So, as it says on the screen, designated checks and half of the cash collected will go to the AIDS Service Foundation. So use your memo line on your check. The collection will now be taken and gratefully received.
Call me,
Please join me now in the words of dedication for our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create a just and compassionate society. Thank you.
From Women, Food, and God by Janine Roth. This is the hard part for anyone, for me, to see that the associations we have with feelings are in the past. To see that we avoid feelings because of the story we tell ourselves about them. Grief hurts. Sadness hurts. But it's not the feelings that destroy us. It's what we tell ourselves about the feelings. If you get stuck, it's because you're having a reaction to a particular feeling. You don't want to feel this way. You'd rather be happy right now. You don't like people who feel like this, or you're locked into a comparing or judging mode. Feelings are in the body. Reactions are in the head. A reaction is the mental deduction of a feeling. And beliefs are reactions we've had so many times that we believe they are true. In an attempt not to feel what is uncomfortable, the mind will often rant and ramble and tell us how awful it all is. Here is some of what you may hear. This pain will never end. The sadness will overwhelm me. If I let myself feel it, I will not be able to function. Most of all, remember that inquiry is not about discovering answers to puzzling problems, but a direct and experiential revelation process. It's fueled by love. Because when you evoke curiosity and openness with a lack of judgment, you align yourself with beauty and delight and love for their own sake. You become the benevolence of God in action.
From the Heart Practice of Tonglen. Imagine in front of you, as clearly as possible, someone you care for who is suffering. Although this may be a little more challenging, you may also imagine someone you feel indifferent toward, someone you consider an enemy, or those who have hurt you or others. Open yourself to this person's suffering. Allow yourself to feel connected with him or her, aware of their difficulties, pain, and distress. Then, as you feel your heart opening in compassion towards this person, imagine that all of his or her suffering comes out and gathers itself into a mass of hot, black, grimy smoke. Now visualize breathing in this mass of black smoke, seeing it dissolve into the very core of your self-grasping ego at your heart center. There in your heart, it completely destroys all traces of fear or selfishness and purifies all of your negative karma. Imagine, now that your fear and self-centeredness and negative karma has been completely destroyed, your enlightened heart is fully revealed. As you breathe out, imagine you are sending out radiance of loving kindness, compassion, peace, happiness, and well-being to this person. See this brilliant radiance purifying all of the negative karma. Send out any feelings that encourage healing, relaxation, and openness. Practicing Tonglen with one friend in pain helps us begin the process of gradually widening the circle of our compassion. From there, we can learn to take on the suffering and purify the karma of all beings, giving others our happiness, well-being, joy, and peace of mind. Tonglen practice can extend indefinitely, so that gradually, over time, our compassion will expand. We will find that we have a greater ability to be loving and present for ourselves and for others in even the most difficult situations. This is the wonderful goal of Tonglen practice, the path of the compassionate Bodhisattva.
Life, said the Buddha famously, is messed up. Inherently, from the get-go. Deal with it. I'm paraphrasing as usual, but that's the essence of his insight. Everybody is running around the world trying to figure out what we did wrong that is causing us so much pain. And the awakened one observes that the pain was already there. We were born into it. We didn't start the fire, so to speak. And the most useful question is not, what did we do wrong? But rather, what do we do now? We have all been there, I suppose, no matter how privileged our lives. Everyone in this room has confronted some form of loneliness or loss or shattered dreams. We have all walked with friends or loved ones who were ill or dying or grieving. Each of us has felt the guilt and outrage and helplessness of seeing others, people we don't even know, mistreated or oppressed. The only way to live a life without pain is to be artificially sheltered from reality, as the Prince Siddhartha was by his royal father, until he grew up and became determined to see the real world. Having come face to face with poverty, sickness, and death, Siddhartha decided to get to the bottom of what this meant and what was to be done about it. So he sat down under a tree to figure it out. Through that act of profound contemplation, he became awakened to the truth about life, that suffering is built into the nature of all impermanent things, including us. And following that realization, there arose in him a sense of infinite compassion, a tenderness that was more than just pity for all beings in their pain, so that it was not enough for him alone to escape the ache of existence. Rather, it became his task to offer others the same insight that he had gained, so that they too might awaken into truth and freedom. Suffering is one of the challenges that is sometimes posed in arguments with humanists. How can we bear, or how can we expect other normal people to bear, the sad and painful things that happen in everyone's lives without the consoling belief that God is watching over us and has a plan and will reward us for our patience and acceptance and can rescue us if things get really bad? This morning, I want to suggest that one of the functions of spiritual maturity, toward which I hope we are helping each other to grow in this community, is the ability to confront pain without denial and to be in the presence of suffering without panic. In the absence of this ability, our feelings of compassion are powerless and, in the end, self-indulgent. At the same time, it is worth remembering that the reality of suffering poses a challenge equally to believers in a God of intention, goodness, and power. For if such a God really does love human beings and had the ability to create whatever world he or she chose, why should there be pain in the first place? I actually think that it is easier to accept the notion that the capacity for pain is an artifact of organic evolution, part of our genetic heritage, because without it, creatures would not be alerted to dangerous situations or motivated to avoid injury and protect others. There is a rare neurological condition that makes an individual unable to experience physical pain. And such people are at great risk because they don't know when they are hurting themselves by scratching their eyes, for instance, or when they're doing something injurious like leaning against a hot stove. It is no gift to be absolutely pain-free as beings in this world. Yet thousands of years of theological pondering have yet to produce a satisfactory explanation of why a God who could have done otherwise should have created a world in which such suffering would be necessary. The traditional humanist response to this dilemma has been to repudiate the question of why and ask instead, what can we do to alleviate the pain of the world? How can we solve it, prevent it, medicate it, stop it? This is an instinctive reaction to our own pain or anyone else's. Take your hand off the hot stove. Remove the splinter. Stop walking on the sprained ankle. Yet it is not, as we shall see, a sufficient answer. For depending on the situation, it may be useless or even counterproductive. When someone you care about is grieving, for instance, or when a whole community of people is living in oppression, in these situations, removing the feeling of pain is really not helpful. It actually prevents the processes that need to happen in order for life to thrive. In fact, this impulse to alleviate the source of suffering so that the pain will cease is one side of the response that I am calling panic. It seems compassionate, but when it is examined closely, it often turns out to be self-serving. I want to fix things quickly so that the pain will go away and neither I nor anyone else will be called upon to deal with it anymore. Yet these quick fixes may not solve anything in the long run and may dismiss the integrity of an experience such as grieving, for instance, that actually deserves to be honored. On the other side of panic is the impulse to flee from suffering, to avoid people who are ill or hurting in some way, to distance yourself from the discomfort of your own or someone else's painful truth. This is why in many traditions it is a religious obligation to visit and care for the sick, because there is a common human tendency to avoid being around those in pain, especially when there may not be anything we can do to fix the problem. Modern Western culture is filled with distractions and addictions that serve to deaden our awareness of the suffering around us and within us. Watch TV, go shopping, have a few rounds of Jack Daniels, or play some high-stakes online poker, or a couple of double fudge brownies, my favorite. All of these trigger our brains to ignore the messages that we are in the presence of pain. So if the response of panic, the impulse to flee from pain or to fix it instantly, is a sign of spiritual immaturity, which I would argue that it is, what are we supposed to do when we are brought face to face with the suffering of the world? This is where I think that the practice of Tonglen, as it has evolved within the community of the Buddha's followers, can be helpful. In essence, it teaches that when we are confronted by pain, what we need to do is breathe. Not run away, not make everything all better, but stay present, stay aware, and breathe. If that seems too simple, then you probably haven't yet totally grasped what is at stake here. For in the Buddhist practice of Tonglen, breathing becomes much more than just a procedure for oxygenating the blood in our veins. In addition, it works as a tool of the imagination to cultivate the moral quality of our inner lives. This system is handy because breathing is something we are always doing as long as we are alive, so it is always available as an instrument to use in this work. The description of Tonglen practice that we heard a few moments ago comes from the website of the Naldor Prison Dharma Service, which is to say that these instructions were prepared for hardened, skeptical convicts who live every day in a setting of both intended and unintended pain. They have little access to prayer beads or communion wine or meditation manuals or stained glass windows or incense or soothing music, but they do still have their breath. And that becomes a tool for practice when they choose to grow the quality of compassion in their lives. And if that process can work for them in the constraints of such an environment of multiple layers of anger, violence, and suffering, how easy should it be for those of us who have so many comforts available on every hand? Yet paradoxically, it may be the folks who are best acquainted with sorrow and despair to whom the practice of Tonglen might come most readily, for they have the greatest need of it. Clearly, they cannot flee from their own suffering or others, nor do they have many options for fixing anything. You can let that reality ruin your humanity, or you can use it as an opportunity for growth in prison or anywhere else. I want to explore 4 examples of how the practice of Tonglen might work. The technical details are not important, or you can learn more from various references online. The concept is what matters. It is always about visualizing suffering as a toxic substance that you can take into yourself, intentionally transforming it through your intention into positive energy for peace and well-being, which you then breathe out into the world. Now, as with any form of prayer or meditation, I do not believe that this practice changes the substance of the world out there. What it changes is the mind and heart of the one who does the practice, enabling him or her to tolerate being in the presence of another person's pain without needing to fix it instantly or flee. That capacity for presence is a powerful force of comfort and healing that does lead to real change in the world. So begin with the easiest form of Tonglen, which is to practice with someone who is dear to you. In some sense, this is a way of describing what I used to do when I fed my mother in a nursing home during the final year of her life, bite by bite. But Tonglen in its purest form does not involve any action, but consists of purely being present and breathing. Many cultural and religious traditions summon us to attend to those who are bereaved, sitting with them in Shiva, for instance, or the traditional wake. In the Jewish custom in particular, one is instructed to sit down near the mourner, but not to speak unless the bereaved themselves do so. Grief is one of the best examples of pain that no one can fix. As with a physical injury, the body and mind and heart must have time to heal, and in that healing they will sometimes hurt. So you hold your grieving friend in your thoughts, breathe in, summoning to mind their sadness, letting your heart feel what they might be feeling, and breathe out your love and care for them, your wish for their healing and well-being, and renewed hope for the future. It will feel strange at first, But if you do this just 2 or 3 times, maybe just for 5 minutes each time, it will be far easier to spend time with that person the next time you see them. You will be less anxious about finding the right thing to say, and your presence will be more of a comfort to them. A somewhat more difficult practice is to do Tonglen for someone you have reason to dislike or distrust. This might be a public figure like Harvey Weinstein or Steve Bannon or Fred Phelps. It might be someone you have a personal conflict with, like the thief who mugged you, or the boss who is making your work miserable, or the bully who is tormenting your child. The task here becomes to imagine all the sources of pain that might be present in that person's life, and then breathe in those toxic forces and the suffering they cause, after which you breathe out the intention of peace, wholeness, and goodness for that person. This practice is a moral discipline as well as an emotional one. It asks you to make real not only the inherent worth and dignity of every person, but also the concept of compassion for all beings, in the recognition that the experience of suffering is universal. Again, such a practice is not effective as a way to manipulate that other person's behavior, but it will expand your capacity to be a force for healing in the world, which is the part that you legitimately have control over. Sometimes, of course, the pain that we are most tempted to flee from is our own. It can be very enlightening and even comforting to do Tonglen for ourselves. This means taking our own pain and loss and grief and suffering as an object of reflection, seeing yourself as if from the perspective of a different person, and sending intentions for peace and well-being to yourself. Often, in our achievement-driven culture, we give less compassion to ourselves than we do to anyone else, even though we need it, just like anyone else does. Learning to be gentle and respectful with one's own pain, to understand and embrace the suffering that comes in our lives and not try to evade it or silence it, is an essential part of the journey toward wholeness that each of us must make. Indeed, the connection between ego, attachment, and suffering may be easier to discern when we are looking at our own experience. When you make the shift between the self-pity of seeing yourself as a victim to holding yourself in compassion as a being that participates in all the aspects of life, including pain, you move in the direction of wisdom and spiritual wholeness. One of the important aspects of Tonglen is that it does not endorse retreat into victimhood. Rather, it assumes that all beings have the capacity for wholeness and abundant life. And this becomes most significant when applied to situations of injustice and oppression. It is possible to do Tonglen for groups as well as for individuals, say for all the refugees in the world, or for the people of Puerto Rico, or for the U.S. forces in Afghanistan or Syria, or for those experiencing homelessness. In fact, one of the things I notice about this practice is that the more I do it, the more people and groups occur to me for whom I am moved to do it. While Tonglen is not a substitute for the tangible work of justice making or for practical help to those in need, it serves to create a mindset that respects the dignity and power of those we would help. So often, privileged groups descend upon communities toward whom they feel pity, perhaps with a dose of guilt added in, and in their anxiety to make the pain and their own discomfort about that pain go away quickly, they do exactly the wrong things. And this commonly leaves oppressed communities feeling yet again used and discounted. A more productive and spiritually mature approach would be to try to stand in solidarity with marginalized communities and bear witness to the truth of suffering as they experience it, regardless of one's own discomfort, until both groups have an opportunity to discern together how best to use power to create change. The practice of Tonglen is finally only a tool to help human beings overcome the instinct to panic in the face of pain and either flee from it or grasp at a premature fix. If we are ever to be genuine sources of wholeness, to find peace of mind and heart in our own lives, or to offer healing or justice to others, we have to learn to stand steady in the presence of suffering, for that is the place where true compassion begins. In order to walk with a friend who has lost a loved one, or is in the midst of serious illness or coping with a broken relationship, we have to not be intimidated by the awareness that they are hurting. In order to be peacemakers, we need to honor the suffering, particularly of those we have learned to discount and hold in contempt, and be steadfast in compassion even when compassion is not returned to us. In order to grow into our own greatest wisdom and wholeness, we must treat our own suffering with respect and tenderness, offering to ourselves as much transforming mercy as we do to others. And in order to bring healing and justice to the oppressed of the world, it is essential that we can endure to hear one another's stories and to bear witness to the injuries that have been done before we seek to smooth over the wounds with solutions. In each of these situations, we are invited to let our individual pain be something that we share in common as human beings in an imperfect world, rather than something that separates us from one another into victims and oppressors. In the same way, our shared potential for wholeness and well-being unites us, as does the ability to live with intentional compassion and to work to expand that circle of caring more and more widely to all the beings with whom we partake in the gift of life. The Eastern religious traditions have long described this perspective of mutuality as seeing the divine in one another, that what is most life-affirming in one person reaches out to that which affirms life in others. And this is what finally makes the pain we cannot avoid worth enduring. You don't have to call it God, although some people have done. It's surely not an old man in the sky, but rather the presence that we bring to one another, the willingness not to run away from our suffering, but to find the source of power and goodness within the human heart, mind, and spirit, and share it here, today, together. And that is indeed a wondrous thing. So let's stand and sing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. So let us practice compassion, my friends, for everyone you meet is carrying hidden wounds and unseen burdens. Let us wish all beings well. Namaste.
Yes.